All right, good evening, and to you all who are currently online and who may seize this opportunity to join me live uh, on my show. And I believe that you're all doing well, you're all doing good, and I appreciate those of you who have been commenting and who have been liking my videos and so on and so forth. I believe that you do so from pure contrite hearts, but not in a way. Anyway, so that is good with me. All is good. I believe all of you also doing good. I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna make a short video, and it was actually in response to a brother whom I have been, having a discussion with. It's an open Bible discussion, by the way, and it's all about end time, issues, issues arising or relating to end times, and so we have gotten to a place where uh, Second Peter chapter 3, has been brought up, and so from his position, he believed that that deals with destruction of this material universe. But I think that the Bible or the text doesn't depict a physical annihilation of this material universe, but it's rather has to do with a different concept altogether. But that is good with me, and he has made I think about two videos. I have also made two videos in response, but you know where I want to get to, because see, Second Peter chapter 3 entails a lot, so you cannot just make one or two videos. When you're trying to explain the context to someone, that it's really relates to the end of Israel's history, but not the end of this world. So I think the two videos that I have made in response are not enough. So I have to deal with the substance, because all the video that I have made are the previous verses, because the salient points, or the verses that actually he believed that relates to the destruction of this world has never been touched on, and that is what I'm going to do today. That is what I'm going to do today. So I believe that you're going to join me in this discussion, and those of you who take the opportunity to join me live, you may pose questions and I will deal with the questions straight away. So you know Peter talks about the scoffers, that the scoffers will come in the last days. So it means that Peter Peter and the rest of the apostles were living in the last days. And as I have already indicated in the previous video, last days relates to covenant Israel, but not the world at large or the world as a whole. It is specifically stated that the last days belongs to Israel history in Genesis chapter 49, verse 1, and verse 1 up to 10. We are going to realize that this issue of last days, last hour, and so on and so forth relates to you know terminal covenant generation of Israel. All the eschatological event is going to occur and be fulfilled in the Israel's history, but not the history of this material universe. So is the case. So they had taught in the first century that the coming of the Lord will occur in their days. As I have made two videos, trying to explain or demonstrate to my readers or my listeners or whoever that all their New Testament writers knew that the day of the Lord, what they call the second coming of Christ or the parousia, is going to occur in their days. We have one in James chapter 5, verse 7 through to 9, where it says that the coming of the Lord is at hand, and also the judge stands at the door. So it means at the time of the parousia, the presence of the Lord, what they call the coming of the Lord, together with the judgment, was imminent in the first century. So they knew that this is what is going to occur. We also have another one in Matthew chapter 26, verse 64, when Jesus told the high priest and his retinue or whatever, all the guys around, that hereafter you see me sitting at the right hand side of the power, and you will see me coming in the clouds of heaven. So the coming of the Lord riding on the clouds of heaven belongs to the first century. At least it's something that is going to be experienced in the first century, and it is not something that is going to go beyond at least the lifetime of those who brought these charges of blasphemy against Jesus, before the high priest in Matthew chapter 26, verse 64. So they knew that at least this eschatological event is going to occur in in the lifetime of some of them. So that is what the video that I made yesterday. It contains, I have detailed discussion there. So if you are interested, you can go there and to watch them. Now, one of the as I said, one of the objections, or one of the textual justification for the physical annihilation of this material universe is Second Peter chapter 3. Second Peter chapter 3. But I was talking about the scoffers anyway. So what it means is that, see, the scoffers knew that the apostles have taught that the Lord is going to come in their lifetime. However, to them it took some time. Okay, it's been long, because ever since the gospel start going out from Jerusalem, they've been preaching this. So the don't believers were unsettled, or even including some of the saints. That is why there was apostasy, because they realized that all the hope and the promises that they gave them, that the Lord is going to come soon to destroy those who persecute them, wasn't materialized, in the time frame within which they promised them will occur. So some of them will have to apostatize. Many of them went out from the church, and they could not sustain the faith to the end. So the scoffers were like, well, where is the promise of his coming? Okay, because ever since the fathers died, things were as it were. So where is this promise? You understand? But what you have to know is that this statement was made in AD 64 in most part, because that is when this book was written. Okay, but the coming was on AD 70. You understand? So it was not yet time. All right. So Peter told them that God, with God, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. That is Psalm. Is this Psalm 90 verse 4, I believe. So what he was trying to tell them is that the Lord is a covenant keeping God. He's going to keep, he will keep his promise. He will fulfill his promise of coming in the first century. Okay, all what they have to do is a little. They ought to wait a little, while longer, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. Okay, so God has a time of doing, fulfilling his promises. No one can force him to do that. All what you have to do is to wait patiently for the time, for his time. So he assured them that that is how God view time. And I think this virtually, this statement, this I think it's verse 8 of Second Peter chapter 3, is virtually quoted everywhere. It's quoted, like when you tell them that the Lord has come, with God 1,000 years. And see, you have to even understand that statement. As I said, this I just don't want to go into all of this, because or else I wouldn't, ever finished. But just go to Psalm 90 and start reading there, and you're going to understand God's insight. God can tell time. The chronological significance of some of these statements. God can tell time. So Peter was trying to, because earlier on, Peter had told them that the end of all things was at hand. That is First Peter chapter 4 verse 7. So they knew that which include the resurrection, the judgment, and everything was just at hand. All what they have to do is to wait a little while longer, and he who is coming will come and will not tarry. So it was just an assurance that he was trying to give them, and so on and so forth. Anyway, now if you consider, he said the Lord is not slacking or concerning his promise, as some count slackness, but is long suffering towards us, not willing that anyone should perish, but all should come to repentance. Now remember what happened to those who did not come to repentance in the first century. They were perished. They were perished in the AD 70 pogrom upon Israel. The unbelievers were destroyed, and others were taken into captivity, and so on and so forth. What did Paul say, which is also a coming of the Lord text in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9 following? See, they did not believe it, and so they were sent a delusion to believe a delusion, so that they will be perished on that day. So those who failed to believe, in Christ, they were perishing that judgment upon Israel in AD 70. Okay, so we have to ought to understand some of these statements, not to think that this is something that is going to come upon us. But in a whole, now we get to verse 10. So when we get to verse 10, it says that, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with great noise. So the coming of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. Now, this is a quote from, it comports with Matthew chapter 24, verse 37, and First Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 1 down following. Okay, it all talks about the fact that the coming of the Lord will be a thief in the night. And see, the futurists will appeal to some of these texts and say that, well, we all don't know the day. The day is going to come as a thief in the night. Now, well, this is the deal. If you read Matthew chapter 24, the coming of the Lord as a thief in the night, he likened that coming with what occurred in the days of Noah. People were given in marriage, entertaining, enjoying themselves, and the day, dawned upon them as a thief in the night. So that was the nature of the coming of the Lord. Now, what you have to understand is that in Genesis chapter 7, I believe verse 4, right? Noah was, given 7 days notice ahead of the 7 days notice ahead of the timing of the rains. So, prior to that, he gathered a few, including animals, into the ark. He closed it up, and the rain began. But what happened to those who did not believe? Who did not believe him? Don't believers, the world of the wicked in his days, they were perished. So the rain, you know, came upon them, the destruction came upon them as a thief in the night. But the saints, they knew, okay, Noah, the righteous man, knew the days of the rains ahead. So the days did not catch up with him as a thief in the night, but because he was given the imminent signs of the destruction. So he saved himself. He had, already entered the ark, before the rain began, or before the rain began. But if you look at exactly is what was happening in the first century, the saints knew the signs of the end. So they asked Jesus Christ, give us the signs of your coming. Okay, so the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 was one of the signs, or was a sign of the coming of the Lord, alongside the birth pangs. In Matthew chapter 24, verse 8, the birth pangs were given, the incremental pains, okay, which they endured and suffered from, under the hands of the unbelievers, was a sign that the Lord is going to come to punish those who were destroying them. Okay, and we also have, the going out of the gospel to the unknown world, which was, achieved in the first century. Okay, according to Colossians chapter 1, verse 5 and 6 and verse 23. Okay, all gives a sign that that day was, they knew, the signs of the end. So they had fled the city prior to the invasion by the Roman army led by General Titus. Okay, so the saints knew this day. They knew that the day will come. So they were all the while looking around for the signs of the end. So even prior to that, because they saw the signs and they had fled. So Peter told them that the end of all things is now at hand. So they have to be vigilant, be sober, so that the day will not catch up with them as a team in the night. So it was not the believers, it was the unbelievers. They did not know the signs of the end, but the church knew these signs. So they had fled and they never suffer any harm or damage or death in that destruction upon Jerusalem, which was ordained by Christ. And that is the parousia of Christ we talks about. So the coming of the Lord in the night is not for the saints. The saints knew. Now remember what Paul said in First Thessalonians chapter 3, chapter 5. It says that you know this, okay, you know this, and you are not in the darkness, you are in the light. So they knew all these signs, that the signs of the imminent coming of the Lord. So they had saved themselves from that destruction. Okay, so this is how we have to understand it. It's not that they see we can't quote that and apply it in our time as if it is something that is going to come. It's something that has already come prior to the destruction of AD 7. This was written in AD 64 just to warn them that these are some of the things that you have to look out for, and these are the assurances that the Lord is going to come. So, and you have to hold on to your faith in spite of all these afflictions and tribulation. Just hold on. Okay, do not lose faith, because the Lord is going to dwell upon the apostate. So because apostasy was high on the in those days. Okay, because many could not endure the fate. A lot of them seek their life, and Jesus Christ had warned them that whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake, he will save it. Okay, so it wasn't. They knew, they knew all these things, and so some of them, at least the remnant, some of them, held on to the faith till the end, and they were saved in that judgment. So this is what Peter is saying, that the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the element will melt with fervent heat. Now, this is what the problem comes. Whenever we read this, said that, oh, well, he said the heavens will be, he said that the heavens will pass away with a great noise. Now, see, we what you have to understand is that what heavens and earth, I think there's earth also in this. So okay, now there's earth in this now. So okay, let me read it, or let me read this verse. So the heaven will pass away with a great noise, and the element will melt with fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burnt up. So we tend to appeal to this text and begin to posit its consummation or fulfillment in our future, that this is what is going to happen to the heaven and earth. Okay, and I heard the brother said that the earth here is our physical universe. Okay, but that cannot be true, because in Matthew chapter 24, which brother also believe that has already been fulfilled, there's the morning, the earth will mourn. Okay, the earth, that is the tribe, the earth will mourn. Okay, so that earth was destroyed. Again, what earth was that? It was Israel G. It was the earth, Israel's earth, or Israel's land, specifically the land of Palestine. Okay, that was destroyed in that judgment. So it's the same coming of the Lord, it's the same judgment which Peter, applied. Peter uses here, but he spoke it in an apocalyptic, judgment language. So many of us who are not well acquainted with Jewish judgment language, we get to this and we say that, well, this is physical universe that is going to be destroyed. No, that is not the case. They understood what this language means. They knew that it indicates a fall of a nation. At least they have that in judgment against Babylon in Isaiah chapter 13, verse 10, verse 10 and verse 13, and Edom in Isaiah chapter 34, and judgment against Egypt in Isaiah chapter 19. The same language was used to describe the fall of these nations. So when it comes to this language, the Jewish in the first century, they understood what this mean. But see, because we are in the 21st century and we are not well acquainted with the judgment language of the Jewish, we appeal to this and begin to say that, well, this has to do with the annihilation of this material cosmos. That is not true. And there's a justification, scripture justification, for this. Okay, so they have now what you have to, the heavens and the earth, it's not Genesis. That has to do with Israel's creation. It has to do with Israel's creation. That creation which occurred in Exodus chapter 19, verse 5 and verse 6. See, this is what the Bible talks about. And that world of Moses was regulated, by the Torah. Okay, so the Torah was regulating that world. See, God had created a world, for the Jews, established His presence with them through the temple. Give them His laws and priesthood as well. So that system is that old system is what is going to be destroyed, so that the new system will be ushered in. That world is that which is going to be destroyed, because it was full of evil. Paul called that age my present evil age in Galatians chapter 1, verse 4. So God is going to, Christ is going to come to destroy that world of wicked, Just that is why we have this comparison, we have some elements of this, correlated with what occurred in the days of Noah, okay, which it said that the world perished. Okay, the world was full of wicked people. The world was full of wicked people. So God has to come to destroy that world. Okay, but it is not a physical world that was dissolved. And in Second Peter chapter 3, 2 Peter chapter 2, when you read upwards, it's going to tell you that it was not the material creation. It is not this material universe that was destroyed. It was the work in the world of Noah that was destroyed. And I heard my brother say that it was the hydrological system whatever changed. there was a Hurricane Katrina, I think in somewhere 208 in Florida, and it changed everything. It was so devastating that it changed everything. Does that mean that the physical world was destroyed? So if what occurred in the days of Noah, the hydrological system and whatever changed, does that mean that the physical creation was destroyed and made new? No, that is not the case. So in as much as you try to defend your position, it cannot be true. That is why we have to understand it can never be true. The world perished. So we are talking about the world of the age of Moses, Noah, that was dissolved, but not the material universe, the geophysical creation, material creation. That still remained intact. That is the same world we live in now. So when you get to, it's going to tell you that the same word that is preserved, the same word, also preserved this world in which they live in. So that world has to do with the world of Moses that is going to be destroyed, but not the physical planet, not a physical planet. And if the world of the Moses, the world of Noah was dissolved or delugged in that water, that was inundated by just overwhelming rains, but that does not destroy the material creation. How is it that the same word, the world of Noah, Peter, also preserved by the same word, will then see the annihilation of this material universe if consistency is anything to go by? You understand? So that cannot be the case. So we are talking about now. Remember, right in the first century, we were told that that form of the world in which they live in, and that form of the world was passing away. Okay, because that world was full of evil and it was passing away. You read First Corinthians chapter 7, verse 28 to 31. So they knew that the world in which they live in was passing away. That is why Jesus Christ in John chapter 17 says that they are in this world, that is not in the material universe, but the world of Moses. But they do not belong to that world. Okay, because that world did not contain that, the world did not like them. So they do not belong to the world. Why? Because they do not do the things of the world that existed then. Okay, I think even in the text, in Second Peter, he uses the world existed. So the world that existed there, then they did not conform to the standard of that world. Okay, the world was on its way, while the church was also on its way. You understand? So though they were in the world, but they did not belong to that world. It was the okumeni of Moses. It was the okumeni of the apostolates. Okay, but not the material universe or the cosmos. No, because that form of the world was passing away. And that is why the redeemed, those who were redeemed from that world of Moses, were told not to conform any longer to the standard of that world. That is what Paul told them in Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and verse 2, that they ought to be renewed. In other words, they have to renounce the former lifestyle, okay, of that world from which or from where they've been redeemed and added to the new messianic world that is about to break forth. Okay, so they have to now conform to the standard of the new world or new creation in which they have entered. Okay, because they have their own. That world was regulated by the doctrine of Christ, and also the old law, the old world was also regulated by Torah. So Torah is going to be destroyed, for the gospel to usher in, and the gospel will never be destroyed because it is that incorruptible seed of God which abides forever. First Peter chapter 1, verse 23, 24, following, and in Matthew chapter 24, verse 35 says that the heaven and earth will pass away, but my word, remains. And so this has to do with how do you then understand the heaven and earth that is going to pass away? If the heaven and earth, which Peter also uses, which Peter also applied in his day of the Lord, has to do with this heaven and material heaven and earth which we see, then when this world passes away, where are we going to use the word? Are we going to use the word in heaven? So you have to understand the language, the Hebraic, literature. How did the Hebrews understand the heaven and earth? What was the heaven and earth? And what heaven and earth did Peter talk? Peter talked about that it is going to be destroyed and rolled up and be and melt. What was it that heaven and earth Peter had in mind? All these are the stuff that you have to bear in mind. So as I said, in the first century, the world of Moses was already passing away, and that comports with because the end of all things was at hand. First Peter 4:7. And that comports with Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13, when it says that that world, um, that is the old system of Judaism, was in the process of vanishing away. And that the heavens and the earth of the old world was being shaken to usher in the new heaven and new earth of the unshakable what kingdom. That is what you read in Hebrew chapter 12, verse I believe 22 to 28. It's all about the old system, the old world, the old system of Moses that is being taken away, so that the new messianic world system will come to play. Because the time of the passing away of the Mosaical system was the time of the ushering in of the new everlasting world of Christ. Okay, that has the kingdom as its center. Okay, so this is how we have to understand that. This is what they have in mind. So all the while in the first century, the world then was already passing away. So that is why today we are called a new creation. You see, whoever is in the Lord is a new creation. First, is it a first? What is it? First Corinthians chapter 5, 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17. So it's all about the old world passing away, the old creation passing away, and the new creation being ushering in. That is what Peter had in mind. It was the old world of Moses, not the world of this material universe that we live in. So that you might think that this is what Peter was talking about. You understand? It's because of the way we have been made to believe eschatology, or eschatology was taught, and what we have been made to believe, that we live in the last days, and all these things are going to be dissolved, and all these things are going to be destroyed. You understand? But we are talking about a new. All right, it's good evening here, Madam Akosia, Frempoma Papa B, my one and only Papa B woman. Father, I just like your name, and thank you for the videos that you've been making. I believe that it's helping, marriages, relationship, and so on and so forth, and it helps to build, homes. You are doing a fantastic, job. So you keep it up. Anyway, so as I was saying, it has to do with the new covenant, the new covenant ushering in at the time of the passing of the old covenant. So the church is the new Jerusalem, is the new. So the comparison or the contrast is the old Jerusalem. So the time of the passing of the old Jerusalem, where the temple stood, was the time of the coming in or the ushering in of the new, Jerusalem. That has to do with the church. So you read that in Hebrew chapter 12, verse 22, whereby it is called the city of the living God. So the city of the living God is coming to dwell with men. Paul said in Philippians chapter 3, right, that our citizenship is in heaven, where also we look forward to our Messiah. So the Messiah is going to come to establish his home with us. That is where our citizenship belongs. We belong to the world of Christ, the new world, new messianic world. That is where we belong to. We don't belong to the old world, because the form of that world was passing away, and that form of that world was full of evil. So even the redeemed, again in John chapter 2, John has admonished them not to love the world, because whoever loved that world, that is the word of Moses, stood as God's enemy, because that world was full of evil. Sin was everywhere. Just read about Josephus, and it's going to tell you the kind of carnage, evil, and all that were promoted and perpetuated in that world. So God has to come and dissolve that world, okay, and to usher in an everlasting, life. Everlasting, world full of love, kindness. That is going to be ruled by the gospel, and we know the virtues of the gospel: love. The Spirit is going to dwell in us and to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit, love, kindness, and all these things. This was not the case under the world of Moses. It was full of evil. So it is just going to pass away, so that the new ones will come to play. So when we get to 2 Peter chapter 3, so it talks about this heaven and earth. Now another thing that I have to add: the heaven and earth in the Hebraic literature. In the Hebraic literature, this is how the Hebrews understood the heaven and earth to be. But this thing is missing in today's world. They knew, they call the Jerusalem temple their heaven and earth. The Jerusalem temple was a microcosm of the world of the Jewish. They considered it their world. And you know why? You see, the divine component of the Jerusalem temple has to, the divine, part of the Jerusalem temple has two components. They have the holy place and the most holy place. Now, the most holy place is where it's behind the curtains. Just behind the curtains is the most holy place, and they call that place heaven because that is where God has His throne. Upon the Ark of Covenant is the mercy seat. Okay, so whenever the high priest enters there and blows smoke from the censers, the smoke and encapsulates the place, and the Lord's presence, the Lord comes on this that comes to sit on that seat and shrouded in the what in that clouds. Okay, so they call that place heaven, but the holy place they call it earth because that place that is where they do their usual sacrificial system to atone for sin. Proud, which is different from the annual entry into the most holy place. So they call that place earth. So even when before the high priest enters the most holy place, he has to take off the cassock or the robe that he wears. Yeah, because that robe was multicolored one with bells at the hems, at the hems of the cassock. So that colors, exhibits the minerals of the earth. So whilst he is there, they call it he is in earth. Okay, but before, when you want to go to heaven, you want to go into God's presence, he has to take that attire, he has to take it off and put on something like, because why? He is now entering into heaven. Okay, so the holy place they call it earth, and the most holy place they call it heaven, and the outer court they call it sea. So the temple was the world of the most of the Jewish. So if the Jews say that this world, they are referring to the age in which they live in, the age of Moses, the temple. So the destruction of the world has to do with the temple. That is how they called it. Now remember, you see, when Jesus Christ said that, do not think that I came to destroy the law and the prophet, but I came to fulfill it. But so long as the heaven and earth has validity, not one jot or one tittle of the law will by no means pass, all are fulfilled. Now, Hebrew chapter 7, verse 11, we have correlation between the priesthood, the temple, and the law. Okay, so Jesus knew when the law will come to an end. He knew that the law is in association with the temple. And there was the law that would restrain man from getting access to God's presence. Okay, so the time when the temple will be destroyed will be the time when the law comes to an end. You understand? And then will come in the everlasting temple, okay, which does not come with what? Observation. So the contrast is always drawn between that temple which is made with hands and the temple which does not made with hands. And that was Paul's eschatological hope, because he says that we know that when this earthly tabernacle, that earthly tabernacle has to do with the Jerusalem temple because it was made with hands. It was made with hands. And when this earthly tabernacle is destroyed, now we are going to have a new tabernacle from the Lord. Okay, which is not made with word, which is not made with hand. That is spiritual in nature. And that is the kingdom, the coming of the kingdom. So the coming of the kingdom will come after the old heaven and earth. That is Jerusalem temple has been destroyed. So that the new heaven and earth, that is the messianic world, the messianic temple, the church will come. And this is what Peter was talking about. Okay, so if you read something in Matthew chapter 24, verse 35, that heaven and earth will pass away, but the world remains. The heaven and earth which Jesus spoke about, the Jewish in the first century knew that he was referring to the Jerusalem temple, but that has nothing to do with our physical heaven and earth. That is how the Jewish understood it. But because we are Ghanaians, Nigerians, Americans, we don't understand the language of the Hebrews. Whenever we hear this heaven and earth, oh, it is this. No, they have a way of understanding or interpreting some of this statement. It was the Jerusalem temple. Okay, so when you get to 2 Peter chapter 3, oh, see, I am using this phone. I'm using this phone that always create problem. Anyway, I don't know. It looks like the memory is very, very down, and I hope that I'm just going to get a new one. Anyway, so Madam Akosia Papa B, I believe you are going to get me a new phone. Anyway, that is just by the way. Okay, so this is what it means. So it says that, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, as I've already explained this, and in which the heavens, now listen, the heavens will pass away with a great noise. Now that heaven was already passing away, will pass away with great noise, and the element will melt with fervent heat both the earth. So now we have heaven and earth. So you see where Peter is getting this idea from. In the previous video, I have already told you that Peter's day of the Lord is that which Moses said will come, Songs of Moses, Deuteronomy chapter 33. So if you want to understand, Peter's day of the Lord in this context, just go to the roots, go to the trace it from the Old Testament, and it's going to tell you when this is going to be fulfilled and why the Lord is going to come to destroy them. Everything is there. You understand? That is why Peter said that this is that which the holy prophet said will come. So Peter was appealing to Deuteronomy chapter 33, verse 18 to 36, what Moses said will come. That is what he is saying. He is not saying any other thing apart from what Moses said will come. And that is where, you see, this is very, very crucial. Paul, in his defense, said that in Matthew Acts chapter 26, verse 20 to 22, he said that I am not saying anything different than that which Moses and the prophet said will come. So the New Testament writers were reiterating the Old Testament and pointing to the fulfillment of these prophecies as something that was unfolding before them. Okay, so it has nothing. This is how we have to understand it. So, whatever, if you want to understand the New Testament, go to the Old Testament. But when I joined the Churches of Christ, I was told that the law, everything concerning the Old Testament was nailed to the cross. So there was, what we often appeal to the New Testament, but forgetting that the New Testament writers were also, they also sourced their writings from the Old Testament. See, Paul uses this word as from prophetic writing in Romans chapter 16, verse 24 to 26. So all what they wrote was that which Moses and the prophet said will come, including 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 10. It was from Deuteronomy chapter 32. So if you want to understand, just go there first. So now here we have the heaven and earth, and all the works, and the works that are in it will be burned up. Now, we have this thing we call the stock here. I just wish to, pause at this juncture because I don't want to extend the video, so that, here the economy everywhere is hard, so that at least, people will have enough distance to, right? Because I want to deal with the elements. I want to deal with the stock here. I want to deal with the stock here. What does it mean? What does the stock here mean? What does the stock here mean? The element is going to melt. Was Peter talking about the element of the periodic table? Is that what Peter was talking about? A chemistry teacher talking about the element of the periodic table, boron, cobalt, copper, magnesium. Is that what Peter was talking about? Is that the element that is going to melt? Where was this periodic table until in the early 1800s or something, when Dmitry Mendeleev, right, that Russian scientist brought this things up? Is that what Peter was talking about? The element? No, that is not the case. So we will have to identify the element. So once you're able to identify the element, then we will understand what Peter was talking about. Then you realize that that element has nothing to do with the element constituting the building block of this material, universe. We are going to understand that. So, as I said, Peter was talking about, the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, what Jesus Christ has also, taught about in Matthew chapter 24. Okay, it was about the destruction of the world of the Jewish. It was the world of the Jewish. And as I have indicated, the temple, Jerusalem temple, was the microcosm of the world of the Jewish. So they call it heaven and earth. And we have the outer court being the sea. The sea has to do with the Gentiles. Isaiah chapter 60. Isaiah chapter 60, 61, 62. Just read there and it's going to tell you what that sea, represented. Okay, it's necessary. But when we get to in the next verse, we will identify what that sea means. So they understood the temple as their world, their age, their everything, their economy. So the destruction of the world, which they spoke about, was the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple that occurred in AD 70. So Peter was not talking about anything different from what Jesus had, talked about. And the earth here is not different from, Hebrew chapter 12, verse 25, because it talks about the shaking of the earth. And when would that shaking okay? It's talking about the shaking of the earth and to pave way for the unshaking heaven and earth to come. And it was the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, so that the everlasting heaven and earth, new heaven and earth will come. That is the temple, that is the church, that is the kingdom. The kingdom has no end, it will never be destroyed, and it abides forever. The reign of Christ abides forever. There's no end of the increase of his government. There shall be no end. It will not cease. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 7. You understand? So if you appeal to this and you see earth, then you say, "Oh, this is the earth that he was talking about, Master." That is not true. That is not how they perceive it. Anyway, you may have your understanding, but the Jewish, I believe that they did not perceive the earth, the G, is it the G or the G, whatever, as being associated with the physical materials, cosmos, but they consider it as their land, the land of the Palestine. See, that is what they have it. And in Matthew chapter 24, verse 31, verse 30, 31, the earth there is the same earth here that is about to be, that was destroyed in AD 70. And also in, okay, let me read that and perhaps I may, draw the curtains down. So in Hebrew chapter number 12, so let me read that and draw the curtains down. So the next time I will deal with the element, because it's very, very important. If I want to deal with the element, we will have to prolong the length of the video, but I want to be snappy as I promised to do. So I don't want to go that extent. So in that is the last reading. So in Hebrew chapter 12, and let's start at verse 22. Okay, so this is it said that, but you have come to Mount Zion. Now, if you consider the previous verses, a contrast is drawn between the temple mountain of Exodus chapter 12. Okay, the temple mountain of Exodus chapter 12, and what they call it the cosmic temple. The cosmic temple or the temple mountain in Exodus chapter 12, 19, when Israel were told not to come close to it, because in Israel, when sin has not been forgiven, no one can come to God's presence unless sin has been forgiven. So they were told to come close to the mountain, but they do not have to touch it, because they will have to purify themselves of sins before they can attach it. But now, so that is now we have that contrast with the temple coming of the Lord in the New Testament. It said that, but you have come to Mount Zion, the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. And see, this is what I mean by the Lord has come to dwell with us. They have come. Those in the first century, way back in AD 64, it said that they have come to that city of the living God. What is the city of the living God? The heavenly Jerusalem. Now, the allegory is in Galatians chapter 4, verse 20 to 26. City of the living God, to an innumerable company of angels, verse 23, to the general assembly. Now, the general assembly here is what you call the Feast of Tabernacle, the dwelling of the Lord, among his people. After Rosh Hashanah, after the Yom Kippur, then comes the Sukkot. I think Brother Menu said he's well acquainted with the God-appointed feast days. So I think one of these days we may have to discuss these feast days and see it correlation with the New Testament event as they were as the New Testament event were unfolding in relation with the God's appointed Jewish feast days, the 8 feast days. You realize that it's all just there. Okay, so the General Assembly has to do with the Feast of Tabernacles. That is after the wedding. The Lord now dwells with the church or the bride. So to the General Assembly of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God be the judge of all, to the spirit of the just man made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of the sprinkling that speaks better than that of Abel. Verse 25. See that you do not refuse to. Now listen. See that you do not refuse him who speaks, for if they did not escape, who refused him who spoke on earth. So it's the same earth. How is it the same G? It's the same G. So where then referred to the earth. I have already indicated that the heaven and earth has to do with that relationship that exists between God and man. So who spoke on earth is the same GE, is the same word GE. Okay, who spoke on, but much more shall we escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven. So now you see the contrast here, heaven and earth, the same temple typology, the relationship between God and man, and that always exists, in the temple, setting. So we have the same temple typology. The heaven and earth here, the temple typology. We have it here. So when you appeal to Second Peter chapter 3 and think that the heaven and earth there was the physical heaven and earth. You may be mistaken. Oh. Anyway, so if you turn away from him who speak from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth, he shook the earth, the shaking of the earth. This is what Peter also had in mind in 2 Peter chapter 3. Was it this physical universe that was shook or that was shaking? Or is a different thing? Anyway, this is a quote from Haggai chapter 2, verse 6 following. So you can go there and you are going to get the context. I have exhausted my time. When you excuse, he said, much more shall we escape if we turn away from him who speak from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now, so now is the time when Paul wrote this book in AD 64, but now, not our now, but now has promised, saying, yet once more I shake not only the head, not only the heaven, not only the earth, but also heaven. That's the same heaven and earth Peter talked about in 2 Peter chapter 3. You see, the God is going to shake the heaven and earth, the old system, the Mosaical system, so that the new heaven and earth will come. And you see, in my next video, I am even going to deal with the verse 13, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 13, and I'm going to show you something there. Brother Menu, I'm going to show you something there, so that when you get there, you understand what it means. So the Lord has promised that this time round, He is not going to shake only the earth, but He's going to shake the heaven and earth. What don't we read this in Matthew chapter 24, verse 31, 29? The powers of heavens will be shaking. Don't we have it there? This is what He's going to do, and this has to do with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. The temple was their heaven and earth. It was their microcosm of the world. It was their world, time and space and everything. All right. So when you appeal to 2 Peter chapter 3 and begin to make this assertion that it has to do with this material creation or universe, we may be making a mistake. Anyway, as I said, Brother Menu, you have to hold on because you have spoken so just be following the videos, make your notes. I know you are also going to, respond to them. But there's one more video I have to make. Then I'll give you, the chance to, or the time to also respond to them. So until we meet again, then bye-bye.